Hello, everybody. Hold on a sec, folks. I'm gonna put some music on here real quick. My sister just called me, so just give me a sec. All right, sorry about that. I know I was already starting a little late, but my sister also called me, so she was the one that asked me something. So, anyways, um, welcome to the Mikestand. Today is, of course, Wednesday. Where Wednesday, when today is Wednesday, October 29th, so just a couple more days away from Halloween. We're almost through the almost like 5/6 of the way through the year, basically, everybody. So, anyways, of course, we're gonna give people a chance to come in before we get started here. I'm gonna do something here real quick. Friendly reminder to everybody, of course, if you haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. Um, anyways, as we doing something here though. All right, hopefully that will help things a bit. Anyways, so today is Hump Day, so hopefully everybody's ready to get over the hump of the week here. Hopefully everybody's having a good week. Hope for those of you who do have kids that you're planning a safe Halloween. Um, all right. So with all that being said, as we're coming up on 4 minutes here, let me talk about what's up. So I've got a couple stories to go over tonight. Um, First one's from Bleeding Fool. Our old buddy Avi has some commentary for us. Actually, in the realm of basically animation movies. Why Demon Slayer connects with audiences when Hollywood can't. There's been a lot of talk the last for a while about how for the last few years, as Hollywood has gone woke, people have turned more to you know, anime for their entertainment enjoyment. And then we also have a little puff profile piece. As I guess there's an interview years ago done with the legendary Chuck Jones and Dr. Seuss, talking about how they got the got how the Grinch Stole Christmas all done. Of course, MeTV Tunes will starting this weekend will be doing their Tis the Season for Tunes specials in terms of a lot of the Christmas. Granted, starting this weekend, meaning starting early November here, just seems like every year they keep pushing everything, you know, earlier. You know. I mean, it'd be one thing to start the Christmas movies, all that, in late December, as of course my all-time favorite, Yogi's First Christmas, originally debuted on November 26, 1980, which will mark 45 years this coming coming late November. But with that being said, of course, why don't we go ahead and get into the material? As I said, if you haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So let's get into this here. All right. So, why Demon Slayer connects with audiences when Hollywood can't. Article by Avi Green, published today. So let's see what Avi's got to say here on all this. A writer at The Federalist tells why the anime franchise of Demon Slayer is winning over USA audiences, in contrast to recent Disney fare. Now, mind you, of course, as you guys know, as I've talked about before, Yellow Flash also has talked a lot about this, about how anime is winning over American audiences as Hollywood's gone woke. So this is from the article. This is from the article from the Federalist. President Trump announced Monday that he's slapping a 100% tariff on foreign films. Maybe he saw the box office numbers and panicked. The Japanese juggernaut, Demon Slayer Infinity Crisis, is crushing American animation. Now, mind you, of course, Trump has been, he's basically been on a tour in the Far East, a peacekeeping tour, as it were. In fact, I think I did see a headline where the new Japanese the female prime minister, is planning on nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize. So, anyways, the film sits at 98% from audiences and critics on Rotten Tomatoes, and raked in a record-breaking $70 million in the United States alone on its opening weekend. Meanwhile, DreamWorks Animation's Dogman pulled in $36 million, so just over half. And so Dogman pulled in just over half of what Demon Slayer did over its domestic premiere weekend. And Disney Pixar's Elio flopped at 21%, which is about a third, basically, or 30% of what Demon Slayer did in its debut. So why are Americans shelling out for a Japanese anime movie about a boy with a sword and a demon sister, instead of American-made media? Simply put, Demon Slayer gives audiences what they're starving for: sacrifice, redemption, courage, family, discipline, and the age-old struggle of light against darkness. In other words, the stuff that makes stories worth telling. Yeah, the Japanese storytelling has been better, as long as, of course, the mangakas stay committed to that and don't listen to the loud wokies, who are trying to influence anime. This is Avi's response to what we just read. One potential difference Demon Slayer has from USA animation, though, is that it's more adult, built on R-rated themes of violence, far less Western animated films and TV shows have ever been. And no doubt much of the audience that's giving the film success anywhere is comprised more of teen adult viewership, depending on your viewpoint. Yeah, which is true, because obviously, anime tends to cater more to older. Not to say they don't have their like stuff for like younger kids as well, younger folks as well, kids as well, like Pokemon, Pokemon, Digimon, um, Hello Kitty. Not that they don't have stuff that's more for kids. Pandemonium, I believe, is another one, but most of their fare is for is for the 15 to 25-year-old demographic. The basically the senior high school student to young adult. Even though they do have a lot of you know middle school protagonists as well in a lot of their stories. So which Tanjiro would be about that 14, 15 right there. He might be a little older, but anyway. Depending on your viewpoint, that's something USA animation producers could consider, but that alone would obviously not improve a dire situation where heroism, family, and courage are sorely lacking as themes of positivity. Well, yeah, Demon Slayer is basically about a young man going out fighting demons, trying to protect his sister and trying to find a cure for a sister who was turned into a demon. But yet she still somehow remains has her humanity remained somewhat. So why if there's any opposition to anything that could resemble sex positivity, as the same writer at the same site once had, that too is definitely troubling. If Demon Slayer upholds masculinity, then I'm not sure what the beef is with quote unquote scantily clad women, unless it's villainesses we're talking about. Isn't heterosexuality also crucial for masculinity? And if she doesn't have an issue with Wonder Woman wearing a bustier, um, wearing a bustier, then there should be no issue with scantily clad women in Demon Slayer, um, unless it's criminals they're talking about. Well, I mean, you know, again, anime in terms of its that's from Avi's point of view, but anime, as we said, is catered more. Most of the popular animes that most people know of, like Demon Slayer, uh, Bleach, Naruto, Yu Yu Hakusho, Dragon Ball. They cater more to an older demographic, that 15 to 25-year-old. They are going to push the boundaries a little bit more. So, um, not to say that anime they don't have their like kiddie stuff, as it were, but So going back to the article, then he's referencing the article here. Demon Slayer has obvious Buddhist, and Shinto influences, and the story's Japanese creator clearly did not set out to write a Christian parable. Of course not. you know, Granted, even though Christianity has made some inroads in Japan, it is still primarily a Buddhist Shinto country, in terms of their religious practices. I mean, they are, the Buddhism and Shintoism are ingrained in their culture, just as Christianity is somewhat ingrained in, Southern America, the southern part of the U.S. culture, Southern United States culture, right? Yet the eternal truths seep through anyway. There's a reason for that. Um, In the last battle, the final book of the Chronicles of Narnia, Ernest, a Calamine soldier, is welcomed into Aslan's country, in parentheses heaven, despite never having served Aslan in life. A sincere worshipper of Tash, um, Emeth, had sought to live faithfully and honestly, and when he dies and meets Aslan face to face, he learns that every act of love and integrity he performed belonged to Aslan all along. For nothing good can be done in the name of Tash, nothing evil in the name of Aslan. So I guess in the Chronicles of Narnia, I guess Aslan is the stand-in for God or Jehovah, while Tash is the stand-in for Lucifer, Morningstar, Satan. In this, Lewis shows that truth and goodness are not bound by human labels but flow from God Himself. It is for this reason that stories written with sincerity, love, and a longing for the good, whether intended or not, inevitably echo Christian themes of sacrifice, redemption, courage, and the triumph of light over darkness. And this is precisely why Demon Slayer resonates while much of American animation flounders. Hollywood insists on stories that purposely deny that the eternal patterns, sacrifice, redemption, good versus evil, and so its offerings feel hollow. Aesthetic or atheistic Japan tells a tale about demons and swordsmen, and somehow it strikes closer to the of reality, um, heart of reality than a multi-million-dollar Pixar production. I don't know if Japan is per se atheistic. Okay, because Buddha is considered a god to them. So wouldn't call Japan atheist just because they don't share your religious views doesn't mean that they don't worship a god. You know, um, you might think of it as a false god, but you know, but they still serve a god in their own perspective. Don't get me wrong, I want American animation to do well. I'm not happy that foreign media is better than our own. And Trump is right to be disturbed by films like Demon Slayer thriving in the United States. But the problem isn't that Americans aren't watching Japanese anime. It's that Hollywood has stopped telling the kind of stories that, quote, set hearts ablaze, unquote. And while I love Trump's tariffs, I fear no tariff is going to fix it. Yeah, and I think in this case, putting tariffs on film, I mean, if his goal is to get Hollywood to film more stuff in the U.S., then I'm all for it. But to basically put tariffs on it to make it harder for people to watch Japanese anime, I think that might be taking it a little too far. I mean, I'm not, I understand some people's concerns about tariffs, but I think, it depends upon what you're using the tariffs for. Are you if you're trying to do it to foster more, homegrown business, as it were, home economy, then all the power to you. You know. So now this is Avi's Avi's response to what we just read. Well then, depending how one views the topic, wouldn't it also do some good to make a call for producing cartoon stories marketed for adults? Actually, we kind of already have that, albeit those have kind of gone woke too a little bit. Of course, South Park, which we've been talking a lot about lately. The Simpsons, like basically a lot of what Fox comes out with. The Simpsons, Bob's Burgers, American Dad, King of the Hill, you know, Futurama. Convincing them it's worth watching, and at the same time, maybe trying to make something worthwhile that doesn't really rely on grisly violence. There's been too much of that in the past quarter. Now, Avi's big issue with a lot of entertainment is that you know too much. He claims too much darkness. You know, um, I think most people would disagree with him. I know when I've talked to RJ about some of Avi's articles before, RJ Carter, he pointed out that I think Avi will at times will say this stuff just to get reactions, but um, but he does seem to be pretty consistent in his commentary here on maybe modern entertainment is too dark, too violent. I I wouldn't completely disagree or agree, but but that's why it's good to go back and watch stuff from the golden age, stuff like Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry and all that. uh let's see here. There's been okay, yeah, and that's something that's time to fix. Ditto the sex negative propaganda that's become a sad staple of recent. And of course, maybe in the future, somebody can form the kind of animation production outfits the Daily Wire's been backing that can develop stuff with themes both children and adults can learn something promising from. For now, the same people complaining are spending too much time expecting Hollywood to clean up the mess they're making. Yeah, they're just chugging along. All right, so there we go with that story. As I said, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking, sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So now we'll go on to the next um, we'll go on to the next we'll go on to the next article here. A little bit more of a positive spin here. Now that we got into the more serious, darker stuff, now let's take a look at something a little lighter. As MeTV Tunes, of course, is going to be doing tis the season for tunes programming coming up here starting this weekend, of course. Well, let's get into this story. Again, feel free to comment and or ask questions if you guys. That goes for both my Rumble and my YouTube viewers. Feel free to engage as much as you'd like. All right, so how Chuck Jones and Dr. Seuss made How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Jones had wanted to turn one of Dr. Seuss's stories into a cartoon for a long time, and now Christmas stars were aligning. So So article published today by MeTV Gym staff. So let's see what they have to say on this. During World War II, Chuck Jones and Theodore Geisel, also known as Dr. Seuss in parentheses there, were assigned to work together for the animation department of the First Motion Picture Unit of the Army, producing propaganda and training films for the military. The two worked together to create the Private Snafu cartoon series, and this collaboration marked the beginning of a lifelong friendship. So wow, they got together in World War II and were working together on Private Snafu. So that's pretty interesting there. Right. Continuing on here. Years after the war, in 1965, Jones heard through the animation grapevine that a Charlie Brown Christmas was in the works, and this got Jones thinking about what his ideal Christmas cartoon television special would be. And that reminded him of his old buddy, Dr. Seuss, who happened to have a Christmas storybook called How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Jones had wanted to turn one of Dr. Seuss's stories into a cartoon for a long time, and now the Christmas stars were aligning. Wow, they really double quoted that, didn't they? There was one problem. Jones recalled in an interview with the Television Academy, in smaller quotes in parentheses, Seuss was anti-Hollywood, very much because when he left right after the war, they pirated a lot of his stuff and took his credits off of features. He did some documentaries, one of which won an Academy Award, in parentheses, but somebody else took it. So he was pretty sour on that. So I told him this was another field. This is television, unquote. Now Jones had no experience in television, and The Grinch was his first non-theatrical cartoon short project. But his insistence was enough to convince Dr. Seuss to agree to the project. So think about it, two of the some people would argue two of the best creative minds in animation getting together and to give us How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Well, of course, Dr. Seuss had written it, and then Chuck Jones is going to help him put it into a movie, put it into TV movie form. Jones raced off to create the storyboards with Maurice Noble and began pitching the TV special to sponsors to get the show on the road. The second most important thing after getting Dr. Seuss on board was getting Boris Karloff, who served as the legendary narrator for the movie. Boris Karloff, for those of you who may not remember, famous Halloween movie actor. I think he was Boris Karloff was the one who did. I believe he did Dracula. I believe. Actually, either Dracula or Frankenstein, one of the two. Yeah. Actually, no, it was Frankenstein, I believe. Jones had been a longtime fan of Karloff's narrations of Rudyard Kipling's books. Quote, he had this lovely, wonderful voice. Everybody thought of him as being a villain, unquote. Jones shook his head, quote, and he was so clear when he read it. You know, he really gave accent to each one and each note. The narrator was important there. Unquote. They had MGM and a sponsor, and now Boris Karloff was on board. But they hit another snafu. I don't know if the pun was exactly intended there, considering who we're talking about here. The adapted screenplay only lasted 12 minutes, and they needed to pad it. But Jones wanted this to be a holiday classic and didn't want to fluff it up for timing's sake. So he found a character that played a smaller role in the book to play a larger role in the movie. Max, the dog. Uh, Quote, if you extend, in parentheses, the story, you find somebody in there that's important, like the dog turned out to be the most important character to me. Old Max, unquote. Jones explained, quote, because Max represented every boy's dog, in parentheses, Max represents the audience, unquote. Interesting take there. Anybody have anything to add to that kind of notion? Anybody here who may have saw How the Grinch Stole? Do you think that Max the dog represented you, the viewer? Your thoughts are welcome here on the matter. Huh. Jones continued, quote, he's a slave, but he has to do what he's told. But he also is observing that he obviously doesn't like it. And so he plays a very important part to me all through the picture, unquote. As an animator, Jones enjoyed using Max to reach to the Grinch and for visual gags. But for the story, Max gave the audience a voice while giving the Grinch one character to really care about, perhaps making Max the reason why Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes that day. Watch MeTV Tunes. 'Tis the season for tunes on MeTV Tunes. Saturdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 Central, 2 Pacific, or no, 3 Pacific, and Sundays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 Central, 2 Pacific. Yeah. So, anyways, so they're like mixing it up a bit, having them on having on Sundays slightly earlier, filling in the spot that normally goes to like the Smurfs. Smurfs, Top Cat, I believe, and then all right. So with that, let's see where are we at on time here. 34 minutes. All right. Let me think. Let me see. I believe. Let's see what else we might have. Yeah, well, we might save that for tomorrow. All right, I think with 35 minutes, I think it's a good time to maybe um, get ready to do the wrestling wrap up here. As of course, um, we're gonna take a look back at last night's NXT. Look ahead to tonight's Dynamite. Of course, as WWE is continuing to build towards Saturday night's main event. Well, actually, NXT is doing their own thing, of course. Well, let's go back to last night's NXT. As some stuff was happening on NXT last night, as of course one of the big news stories to come out involving Sol Ruka with her injury. Of course, she had Zarya defend and lose the women's North American title to Blake Monroe at this past Sunday's Halloween Havoc. Well, on last night's NXT, she was also forced to relinquish the speed title, the women's speed title, while she's off to recover. So we'll stay tuned more of that. Of course, both speed titles are going to be competed. So looking back to last night's NXT coming from the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, Florida, with Booker T and Vic Joseph on commentary, and of course at one point Josh Briggs joining them. Opening match of the evening saw the number one contenders finals match for the speed title to see who would next challenge El Grande Americano for that title. Jasper Troy would defeat Axiom to challenge El Grande Americano in just under 3 minutes. Of course, the speed title, there is a time limit on it, 5 minutes. So 5-minute speed matches. Jasper Troy will and then in the next match, Kendall Gray, who is the current WWE Evolved Women's title holder, with Ren Sinclair in her corner, defended and retained the title over Lash Legend. Then you had in a battle of former No Quarter Catch Crew stablemates, Miles Bourne getting the win on Tavian Heights, as Tavian Heights was trying to regain some momentum after falling short in his quest to become the new NXT North American Championship a while back, a month ago. The match for the NXT Women's title between Tatum Paxley and Lola Vice went to a no contest. And in the main event, Kalani Jordan retained over Jordan Gray. In the main event, Kalani Jordan, the TNA Knockouts World Champion, retained over Jordan Grace after she delivered a belt shot to Grace while the referee was pretending to some outside interference, as Ricky Saints and Trick Williams were on the outside brawling. Trick Williams trying to stake his claim to being a top contender to the NXT title, being a former NXT champion himself, coming off his loss of the TNA World Championship. But could this mean that Kalani Jordan is now turning heel? She basically clocked Jordan Grace with the belt, giving her a big gash in her head. But that's all the more. That's all we got on that front. Now let's get ready to take a look at tonight's Dynamite, as of course, as AEW is looking to continue building things up there. There we find. So tonight's Dynamite, which is being called Fright Night Dynamite 2025, coming to on TBS, coming from the Burt Ogden Arena in Edinburgh, Texas. Match is already announced for tonight in a Trick or Treat Tornado Tag Team match. Orange Cassidy of the Conglomeration teams of Darby Allin taking on the Death Riders, Daniel Garcia and Wheeler Yuta. The teaming of these two former rivals over a few years ago from the for the Ring of Honor Pure title. Jon Moxley, the Death Rider, is set to take on Kyle O'Reilly of the Conglomeration and the Paragon. In a quarterfinal match in the tournament to crown the first ever AEW Women's World Tag Team titles, Queen Aminata and Jamie Hayter will be taking on the Sisters of Sin of Sky Blue and Julia Hart of the Triangle of Madness faction. In a number one contendership match for the number one contendership four-way match for the AEW World, this will determine who will next face Brodito for the AEW World Tag Team Champions. The three-time champs, the Young Bucks of Matt and Nick Jackson, take on three-time champs FDR of Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler versus former champs Jurassic Express, Jack Perry and Luchasaurus, and Jet Speed of Speedball Mike Bailey and Knight, and another number one contendership four-way match for the AEW World Title against Adam Page. Samoa Joe looks to once again earn a shot at the AEW World after coming up short at Wrestle Dream. Versus Bobby Lashley, a former world champion in his own right, and of course WWE and WWE TNA, WWE and TNA, Ricochet and Hook. So it's going to be interesting to see the interaction between Hook and Samoa Joe, considering that Hook was at one time a part of the World Trios title champions with Samoa Joe and Powerhouse Hobbs until, of course, his injury he was forced to be replaced by Katsuyori Shibata, and now going to be interesting to see that interaction. So, with that being said, that's all I got for the wrestling wrap up. So, now there has been some talk too. There's a possibility WWE may be looking to bring Andrade back, and they've been using the non-compete clause as a way to try to coax him back, which I think there's been that story been running around. I don't know if that's a really keen way to do things. But now, with all that being said, of course, now with today being let me check one more thing here. See if there's anything to do for tomorrow. All right. Just saying if there'd be another indie comic showcase this week, which there isn't. So we'll probably have some other news items tomorrow. So with that, anyways, with today being Wednesday, October 29th, 2025, let's go ahead and take a look back at this day in each history. History! So 1985, 95, 75, and 2005. All right. So with that being said, um, so first off, we're going to head back 50 years ago today, as on this date 50 years ago today, back in 1975, as we're going to. On this date in 1975, American arranger, composer, and orchestra leader Uncle John Scott Trotter Jr. passed away at the age of 67. Now, who is this arranger, composer, and orchestra leader, and why is he a key figure in animation history? Well, I'm about to tell you. Trotter was best known for conducting the John Scott Trotter Orchestra, which backed singer and entertainer Bing Crosby on record and on his radio programs from 1937 to 1954. Now, this is where his roles in the animation world come into play. He also worked with Vince Guaraldi on the score for the Peanuts animated television specials and feature films from 1966 to 1975. So, so this is a guy who was doing the music for such specials as um, a Charlie Brown Christmas, a Charlie Brown Halloween special, or It's a Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Um, some of those series was why this guy. So on this date, 50 years ago today, American arranger, composer, and orchestra leader Uncle John Scott Trotter Jr. passed away at the age of 67. So, and he was actually working all the way up until his death as well there. So, all right. So, getting ready to move on to the next piece in each history. Getting ready to. We move ahead 10 years. The year 1985 is on this date in the year 1985, as soon as I pull it up, of course. On this date in the year 1985, the 20th issue of Archie's Double Digest magazine from Archie Comics went on sale on newsstands on this date back in spinner racks. On this date back in 1985, it sold for $1.95. It was 296 pages. Victor Gorelick did the editing for this. On this date back 40 years ago today in 1985, the 20th issue of Archie's Double Digest magazine went on sale on newsstands and spinner racks on this date back in 1985. All right, moving ahead to the year 1995. 1995. Anyways, so on this date back in 1995, 30 years ago today, from the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan, WCW held its Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. Of course, this show was noted for a number of reasons, as in the main event, the Giant, who we know today as the Big Show, Paul White, with Taskmaster in his corner, defeated Hulk Hogan to become the new WCW World Champion via DQ in a match in which it was signed that the title could change hands on a DQ. Normally, a title cannot change hands on a DQ unless otherwise specified. But this was a match where that was the case. This was, I think, of course, Paul White's first major championship. And I think he was like 20 years old at the time or so. One of the youngest World Heavyweight Champions. So on this date, 30 years ago, WCW held its Halloween Havoc from the Joe Louis Arena, in which in the main event, the Giant defeated Hulk Hogan to become the WCW World Heavyweight Champion. Also on the show, of course, Randy Savage defeated Lex Luger on the show. Ric Flair and Sting defeated Arn Anderson and Brian Pillman via DQ in a match that saw Flair turn on Sting and reform the Horsemen with Anderson and Pillman. Then, of course, Kurosawa defeated Road Warrior Hawk. And then the show opened up with Johnny B. Bad defeating Diamond Dallas Page to become the new WCW World Television Champion. So 30 years ago today, Halloween Havoc, WCW Halloween Havoc happened from the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan. And finally, moving ahead to the year 2005, on this date in the year 2005, in a rare occurrence of us talking about a Korean anime, on this date 20 years ago today, Sono Kong and Hewon Entertainment's Daijong Jongwon's Dream premiered on Korean television on its date back in 2005. So 20 years ago today, the Korean anime Daijong Jongwon's Dream premiered on Korean television on this date back in the year 2005. So, all right. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. Of course, we'll be back here with more Niche News tomorrow. I've already seen at least one story we might do of interest. Also, of course, I'll be joined this Sunday by Rick Piper from Cross Comics. We will be taking a look at comics that went on sale in July. We'll be continuing our look down Comics History Lane from July of 1940. Books that went on sale from Timely Comics, known today as Marvel. We'll be looking at Marvel Mystery Comics number 11. We'll be looking at such features as the Human Torch, the original Human Torch, the android Jim Hammond, Namor the Submariner, the first Marvel hero to take the name Angel, long before Warren Worthington, and Electro, the hero Electro, not the Spider-Man villain. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight, and I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.